Hi, I'm Christina, and today I'm going to be looking at the Women's Prize for Fiction 2022 long list. Now, I will just say that I had a little peek when it was first announced because I just couldn't help myself, but I haven't looked any further into any of the books, so that's what I'm going to do right now. So I have actually read one of the books out of the 16 that have been longlisted, and that is Flamingo by Rachel Elliott. Now, I'd never actually heard of this book or heard of the author. I just saw it in my library and I was initially just drawn to this beautiful cover. And when I picked it up and read the back, I thought, yeah, it definitely sounds up my street. And surprisingly enough, I'd only finished reading this book 2 days before the long list had been announced. So I was really shocked that it was actually on there because I thought I'd found quite a hidden gem. But I have to say, I thought it was absolutely wonderful. I really enjoyed my time with this one. I'm going to do a full book review on it, so I will link that down below and you can hear more of my thoughts on it. But yeah, I thought it was really good. And I think it could be a worthy winner, even though I've only read one. This is definitely one of my favourite books of the year. And I have to say, it's one of my favourite books of all time now, which is quite a big statement, but it's absolutely true. I thought it was really excellent. Really well written, very beautifully written, and yeah, really good. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of her books. I know this is her third novel, so I have 2 other books to read. So now let's look at the other 15 books on the long list. First up, there is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Kupersmith. So I haven't heard of this book, I haven't heard of this author, but it immediately sounds really intriguing. So we have 2 young Vietnamese women who've both gone missing decades apart. Both are fearless, both are lost, and both will have their revenge. We have one teenage daughter of a wealthy Vietnamese family going missing in 1986, and we have one woman going missing in 2011. So yeah, that sounds absolutely up my street. I really like the sound of that one. I'm definitely going to try and order that one for my library. It sounds really good. Yeah, it sounds really good. It's her debut novel, so that's really interesting. And yeah, it sounds really good. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading that one. I'm going to make a note of that one to get from my library if I can. So yeah, that's one of them I want to read. So let's go back and look at the next one. Sorry if this is going to be completely all over the place. I have no structure for this at all. So it's going to be quite just as it goes. So the next book is, let's see, Careless by Kirsty Capes. Now, I haven't heard of that book either, and I haven't heard of the author. So let's see what this one is all about. So we have a woman who finds out that she's pregnant. She could tell her social worker Henry, but he's useless. She should tell her foster mother Lifa, but she won't understand. She really ought to tell Boy, but she hasn't spoken to him in weeks. Bess knows more than anyone that love doesn't come without conditions, but this isn't a love story. So yeah, that one sounds really intriguing. It might be more of a young adult book if it's about, I assume she's a girl if she has a social worker, but that sounds interesting. It sounds like something I haven't read before. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in reading that one too. So the next book that's been longlisted is Creatures of Passage. So let's see, we have a taxi driver living in Washington, DC, ferrying ill-fated passengers in a haunted car, a 1967 Plymouth Belvedere with a ghost in the trunk. So I have to say, that doesn't really sound like me. I don't generally read about ghosts or paranormal fiction, so that one's not really shouting to me. So I probably won't be picking that one up unless I hear some really wonderful things. But let's just say endless rides and alcohol help her manage her grief over the death of her twin brother, who was murdered and dumped in the river. So that sounds really interesting, actually. And unbeknownst to her, when the novel opens in 1977, her estranged great-nephew, 10-year-old Dash, is finding himself drawn to the banks of that very same river. Oh, that sounds really bad, actually. He's witnessed an act of molestation in his school. Yeah, I'm not really sure that's one for me. I think that sounds quite dark, and I'm not particularly into ghost stories either. So I think I'll probably give that one a miss. But like I say, Build Your House Around My Body and Careless, they're both going on my TBR. They both sound interesting. So the next one is Flamingo by Rachel Elliott. So obviously I won't look into that one. And then we've got Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. Let's have a look at this one. So, from her days as a wild child in Prohibition America to the blitz and glitz of wartime London, from the rugged shores of New Zealand to a lonely ice shelf in Antarctica, Marion Graves is driven by a need for freedom and danger. So, historical fiction and set in lots of different places, so that sounds really interesting. So, determined to live an independent life, she resists the pull of her childhood sweetheart and burns her way through a suite of glamorous lovers. But it is an obsession with flight that consumes her most. Now as she's about to fulfill her greatest ambition, to circumnavigate the globe from pole to pole, Marianne crash lands in a perilous wilderness of ice. So that sounds really interesting, actually. It doesn't sound like something I'd normally gravitate towards, but I am trying to read more historical fiction this year. I had some of my favourite books from last year were historical fiction, and it's a very new to me genre, but this one sounds really good. And it's saying over half a century later, troubled film star is drawn to play the enigmatic pilot on screen. It's a role that will lead her to an unexpected discovery, throwing fresh and spellbinding light on the story of the unknowable Marion Graves. Yeah, I really like the sound of that one, so I'm definitely going to make a note of that one. I'd like to read that one. So now we have A Remote Sympathy by Catherine Chidgey, I think. Let's see. So, moving away from their lovely apartment in Munich isn't nearly as wrenching as an experience as she had feared. Oh, I don't want that pop-up, go away. Their new home is even lovelier than the one they left behind, and life would appear to be idyllic. Lying just beyond the forest that surrounds them is the looming presence of a work camp. So this is set in the war. Not sure I'm particularly interested in this one. As historical fiction goes, I do try and stay away from that part of the genre. It just doesn't always interest me, and I think it can be quite difficult to do well. So, not 100% sure that one's really my cup of tea. So I probably won't put that one on my TBR. But like I say, I'd love to hear what some other people thought of it in case it's a really good one. So let's see. Ooh, I keep getting the exact same pop-up, and it's so annoying. Right, okay. This is a nice name for a book, Salt Lick. I wonder what that one's all about. That one's the most intriguing name so far, by Lulu, Allison. Okay, and we've got some sheep on the front cover. So, Britain is awash. The sea creeps into the land. Brambles and forests swamp derelict towns. Food production has moved overseas, and people are forced to move to the cities for work. The countryside is empty. A chorus, the herd voice of feral cows, wander this newly wild land, watching over changing times, speaking with love and exasperation. So that one sounds right up my street. That's a dystopian kind of science fiction one. It sounds very interesting. So let's see. Jesse and his puppy, Mr. Malix, roam the woods until his family are forced to leave for London. Lee runs from the terrible restrictions of the white town where he grew up and leaves London on foot, walking the abandoned A12 in search of truth and about her mother. So that one sounds really interesting. Yeah, I'm really intrigued by that one. I haven't heard of any of these books so far or any of these authors, so that's really interesting. So the next one, Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. I like the name of that one too. So let's see what this one is about. So, everyone tells Martha she's clever and beautiful, a brilliant writer who's been loved every day of her adult life but by one man, her husband Patrick, a gift her mother once said that not everybody gets. So why is everything broken? Why is Martha on the edge of 40, friendless, practically jobless and so often sad? And why did Patrick decide to leave? So this sounds like a kind of domestic, contemporary kind of book. Maybe she's just too sensitive, someone who finds it harder to be alive than most people, or maybe, as she has long believed, there is something wrong with her, something that broke when a little bomb went off in her brain at 17 and left her change in a way that no doctor or therapist has ever been able to explain. That one sounds really, really interesting, actually, so I'm interested in reading that one, Sorrow and Bliss, so I'm definitely going to make a note of that one. Yeah, that sounds like something that would be on my street, so let's see. Next, we have The Book of Form and Emptiness. Let's see. By Ruth Ozeki. So I've heard of this author. I haven't heard of the book, but at least This is the first author that I have actually heard of. Not read any of their books before. So let's see. After the tragic death of his father, 14-year-old Benio begins to hear voices. The voices belong to the things in his house and sound variously pleasant, angry or sad. Then his mother develops a hoarding problem and the voices grow more clamorous. So that sounds really intriguing. We have a 14-year-old narrator, which I like the sound of that. And obviously it's going to have a lot of themes of grief and family, and they always really interest me. So when ignoring them doesn't work, Benny seeks refuge in the silence of a large public library. There he meets a mesmerising sweet artist with a smug pet ferret, a homeless philosopher poet who encourages him to find his own voice among the many, and his very own book, who narrates Benny's life and teaches him to listen to the things that truly matter. Yeah, I like the sound of that one. That sounds really intriguing. So that is another one that I'm going to put on my TBR. I actually didn't think there would be so many books here that would interest me. I think there's only been a couple so far that really didn't sound like my cup of tea, just for whatever reason. So yeah, my TBR is getting bigger and bigger. I'm planning to read lots of these in April if I can. I'm obviously going to make a note of these and I'm going to reserve them for my library, and I'm probably just going to read them by which one's coming first, to be honest. So let's see. The Bread the Devil Knead. That's an interesting name for a book. I like the look of that one. Just by the name alone, I'm quite intrigued. So let's see. So we have a woman who's about to turn 40. She's fashionable, feisty, and fiercely independent. She manages a downtown boutique, but behind closed doors, she's covering up bruises from her abusive partner and seeking solace in an affair with her boss. When she witnesses a woman murdered by a jealous lover, the reality of her own future comes a little too close to home. That sounds really intriguing, actually. So it sounds kind of like a contemporary novel in the beginning, but then if we're going to have a murder being witnessed, maybe it's turning more into like a thriller or a mystery. So I really like the sound of that one. So let's keep reading. Bringing us her truth in an arresting, unsparing Trinidadian voice. Oh, she unravels memories repressed since childhood and begins to understand the person she has become. And her next step is to decide the woman she wants to be. So yeah, I'm really intrigued by that one. That sounds pretty good, actually. I wasn't 100% sure when it was just going to be about a woman and an abusive partner and an affair. That didn't sound like my cup of tea at all. But then it turned into something I think maybe a little bit that would interest me. And like I say, I think the title for that book is excellent. I like a little bit of wordplay. So now we have The Exhibitionist. Let's see. So I've never heard of this author either, never heard of this book. So we have a family gathering for a momentous weekend as famous artist and notorious egoist prepares for a new exhibition of his art, the first in many decades, and one he is sure will burnish his reputation for good. His 3 children will be there: beautiful Leah, always her father's biggest champion, sensitive Patrick, who's finally decided to strike out on his own, and insecure Jess, the youngest, who has her own momentous decision to make. So, but I'm kind of lukewarm about that one. It sounds interesting enough. It sounds like a kind of general, kind of contemporary. I think I will pop it on my list to try to read, just because I would like to give some books I maybe wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards a chance. So let's just see. What about Lucia, Ray's steadfast and selfless wife? She's an artist too, but she's always put her role as a wife and mother first. What will happen if she decides to change? For she is hiding secrets of her own, and as the weekend unfolds and the exhibition approaches, she must finally make a choice. So that sounds, yeah, okay, that's grabbed my attention a little bit more. That sounds relatively intriguing. So yes, probably have a look at that one. So let's see, we've only got a few to go now. We have The Final Revival of Opal and Nev by Dawnie Walton. So let's see. So again, not heard of the author, not heard of the book. Let's have a look what we have. So we have a fiercely independent young woman pushing against the grain in her style and attitude, a black punk artist before her time. Despite her unconventional look, she believes she can be a star. So when the aspiring British singer-songwriter Neville Charles discovers her one night, she takes him up on his offer to make rock music together. It's in the early 70s in New York City. Yeah, okay. I mean, this doesn't sound completely up my street from the beginning. Not normally into books that are like predominantly about music. So probably won't put this one on my list, actually. But yeah, interesting enough. And I do think it's great that there's so many authors that I've literally never heard of. So let's see. We have the same pop-up keeps popping up, right? The Final Revival. No, we've done that one. The Island of Missing Trees. So let's see this one. Oh, it's got a really pretty front cover. So it's in 1974, so another historical fiction. Seems to be a lot of historical fiction on this list, which I'm actually really pleased about because that is a genre I would like to read more of. So it's in Cyprus, so that's really good. That sounds good. We've got two teenagers from opposite sides of a divided land. They meet at a tavern in a city they both call home. One is Greek and Christian, and one is Turkish and Muslim. So it's one of the only places they can meet, hidden beneath the blackened beams from which hang garlands of garlic, chili peppers, and wild herbs. So this one sounds right up my street. I'm really intrigued by this one. So this is where one can find the best food in town, the best music, and the best wine. But there's something else to the place. It makes one forget, even for just a few hours, the world outside and its immoderate sorrows. That sounds really, really intriguing. Oh, and then it's also going forward in time. Decades later in North London, 16-year-old Ada has never visited the island where her parents were born. Desperate for answers, she seeks to untangle years of secret, separation, and silence. That sounds really, really good. I'm really intrigued by that one. So now we've only got a few more to go. We have The Paper Palace, and this one is a Reese's book club pick, but I have to say that I've not actually heard of it, even though I do kind of follow her book club. So anyway. So this one is on a perfect August morning, Elle Bishop heads out for a swim in the pond below the Paper Palace, her family's holiday home in Cape Cod. As she dives beneath the water, she relives the passionate encounter she had the night before against the side of the house that knows all her darkest secrets, while her husband and mother chatted to their guests inside. So begins a story that unfolds over 24 hours and 50 years as Elle's shocking betrayal leads her to a life-changing decision and an ending you won't be able to stop thinking about. So that one sounds really good. I really like books that are set in a 24-hour period or a very short span of time. That sounds really intriguing. So it kind of sounds like a kind of contemporary, domestic contemporary kind of book. So yeah, I'm going to keep a note of that one because I'm definitely intrigued by that one. Maybe not the kind of thing that I'd usually gravitate towards either. If I just kind of saw that, I probably wouldn't rush to pick it up. So I'm trying to kind of broaden my reading horizons a little bit. So just two more to go now. We have The Sentence. So let's have a look at this one. So this book asks what we owe to the living, the dead, to the reader and to the book. A small independent bookstore in Minneapolis is haunted from November 2019 to November 2020 by the store's most annoying customer. Flora dies on All Souls Day, but she simply won't leave the store. So I know I said previously that I'm not really into kind of ghosts or paranormal books, but that one sounds actually really quite intriguing. So I might actually give this one a go. I really like the idea that it's set in a small independent bookstore. And if she is an annoying customer, I'm thinking maybe it's going to be a little bit funny, a little bit amusing. So I'm interested in that one. So let's see. Tucky, who has landed a job selling books after years of incarceration, that she survived by reading with murderous attention, must solve the mystery of this haunting while at the same time trying to understand all that occurs in Minneapolis during a year of grief, astonishment, isolation, and furious reckoning. So it's a mystery and proliferating ghost stories. That sounds, yeah, I'm definitely going to give that one a go. That one sounds really intriguing, actually. So, yeah, quite excited by that one. That doesn't sound like something I would normally look at. So now we have This One Sky Day. Now, I have heard of this book, so I think there are only a couple on here that I've actually heard of. And I think this one's been around for a while. I think I've heard other people talk about this one. So, let's see. The world is stirring awake again, each resident with their own list of things to do. A wedding feast to conjure and cook, an infidelity to investigate, a lost soul to set free. As the sun rises, two star-crossed lovers trying to find their way back to one another across this single day. When night falls, all have been given a gift and many are no longer the same. That's quite interesting. So I might give that one a go, potentially. I feel like you don't actually know too much about what's going on in that book, but I'll write that one down as one that I'm, relatively interested in. So yeah, those are all the books that have been longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. Last year I did try to read quite a few of the books on the long list that I was actually interested in reading, and I had a really great time reading them. There were so many books there that I never would have heard of, never would have been exposed to if it wasn't for this prize. So I think that's really, really interesting. And like I say, how many books have I said I was interested in reading? 1, 2, maybe not that one, 3, not that one, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9, 10, 11, maybe 10, 11, 12, which is actually quite a lot. So yeah, I think that sounds really, really interesting. So thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know your thoughts on any of these books. If you have read them, let me know which ones you're most excited to read. Is there any here that surprised you? Any that you're disappointed haven't made the list? I have to say I wasn't really predicting any in my head. I'm a little bit surprised that the Sally Rooney book hasn't made the list, but I have to say I didn't really like it that much. I thought it was a bit average. But yeah, that was really, really interesting. So watch this space. There are so many here that I want to read, and now I'm going to go on quite a quite a spree of reserving and requesting books from my library, because yeah, I'm really excited by all of those. So I'll see you in my next one. Bye.